First thing you gotta know is that hijab means curtain or partition. It does not mean headscarf. The Quran uses forms of the words kimir and jilbab, but not the actual word hijab when it comes to describing a woman's dress. Now the kimir means cover and is what we would call a scarf, and a jilbab is an outer garment. But now the term hijab has become a normal way of describing a Muslim woman's head covering. But Sharia rules on modesty are about more than just covering the hair. It deals a lot with your entire attire, your conduct in public, all really to protect people from sexual advances that are very inappropriate. So much more I can say about that, but moving on to the next fact. There are many different forms of hijab. The hijab comes in many different shapes, and there's some that cover parts of your face, some that cover other parts of the body as well. So hijabs aren't just one style. A woman has options based on her preference. But it's not just women that this applies to. Did you know that hijab also applies to men as well? Because the overarching meaning of hijab is to live one's life modestly, the hijab also applies to men. So while not as well known outside of the Muslim community, men also really strive to wear the hijab both physically as well as mentally. So who can Muslims take off the hijab for? Well, the hijab can really only be taken off in front of family members of a woman, and a Muslim woman wearing the hijab will usually not show her hair to any man that's not related to her by blood. Now, in countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, Muslim women are actually compelled by law to wear the hijab. Other countries, both in Europe as well as in the Muslim world, on the flip side, have passed laws banning some or all types of the hijab in public or in certain types of places. So there's like a complete polarity when it comes to the hijab based on the country that you're in. But nevertheless, women who wear the hijab, they really have started to find a lot more of their strength. And now there's even this term called hijabi that goes around. That's really a term for women who wear the hijab, but it's not like an official term or anything, so you won't find it in the dictionary. Also, hijabs are not worn all the time. Usually the hijab is taken off at home or when hanging out in places where it's like for sure just women only there. And the main thing is that the hijab is worn in front of men who women are not closely related to, like I mentioned earlier. And it's not just Muslim women that cover their hair. In some branches of Judaism and Christianity, women and men also cover their hair. Just look at nuns, the Amish people, Sikhs, and you'll also find this in other religions as well. So it's not really accurate to say that hijab only applied to Muslims. It's not just a Muslim thing, you'll find it everywhere. And the final thing I want to share is that if you look at history, when we look at the pre-Islamic societies, like really before Islam really took the hijab as a faith accessory, the veil was actually representing of an upper class status. So for example, in Mediterranean societies, women would wear veils to show that they were wealthy. However, prostitutes and slaves, they were not allowed to wear the veil at all. There's also similar rules that applied to Greek and Persian societies as well.
So let's start with talking about modesty at a historical glance. Muslims in their first century at first were relaxed about female dress. When the son of a prominent companion of the Prophet asked his wife Aisha bint Salah to veil her face, she answered, "Since the Almighty hath put on me the stamp of beauty, it is my wish that the public should view the beauty and thereby recognize his grace unto them. On no account, therefore, will I veil myself." Later on, as Islam reached other lands, regional practices, including the covering of the faces of women, were adopted by early Muslims. Today, the most familiar form of covering is known as the hijab. Interestingly, the hijab, in the same sense of veiling, can also be achieved by hanging a curtain or placing a screen between women and men to allow them to speak to each other without having to cover. Next, we'll be looking at general rules on modesty. So, the Quran gives general rules which may help in understanding how to interpret dress and other rules in modern times. Surah 7, Ayah 26 says, "O ye children of Adam, we have bestowed clothing upon you to cover your shame, as well as to be an adornment to you. But the dress of righteousness, that is best. Such are among the signs of Allah, that they may receive admonition." So basically what this is saying is that clothing does not have to be drab or boring. It is all right for both sexes to use clothing to enhance beauty as well as to cover nakedness. The most important thing is to be modest and righteous. Alright, so fact number 8 takes us to looking at men and modesty. So Surah 24, Ayah 30 says, "Say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty. That will make for greater purity for them, and Allah is well acquainted with all that they do." Now, both men and women are commanded to lower their gazes and guard their modesty. However, men in particular are instructed to avoid the temptation of staring at women in order to remain pure of mind. Moving on to women and modesty, there are a lot more regulations here. So some Muslim women wear full body garments that only expose their eyes. Some cover every part of the body except their face and hands, and some believe only their hair or their cleavage is compulsory to hide, and others do not observe any special dress rules. In the Quran, Surah 24, Ayah 3 mentions that, "And say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, that they should not display their beauty and ornaments, except what must ordinarily appear thereof, that they should draw their veils over their bosoms and not display their beauty except to their husbands and a list of relatives, or small children, household servants, and that they should not strike their feet in order to draw attention to their hidden ornaments. And O ye believers, turn ye all together towards Allah, that ye may attain bliss." So I know that was quite a long passage, so we're gonna break that down a bit. Muslim women are required to observe the hijab in front of any man they could theoretically marry. The most basic interpretation of guard their modesty is to cover the private parts, which includes the chest for women. And when we're talking about zina, ornaments, it is another word with numerous meanings. It has been interpreted to mean body parts, beauty, fine clothes, or literal ornaments like jewelry. If we're looking at the jewelry interpretation, this is supported by the instruction of women not to stamp their feet to draw attention to themselves, as it used to be the practice among Arabian women to wear ankle chains to attract men. Now, the phrase "what must ordinarily appear thereof" has been interpreted in many different ways. A popular interpretation of this phrase is that women should only show the body parts that are necessary for day-to-day tasks. This is usually taken to be the face and the hands. However, some scholars do recommend hiding every part of the body but the eyes. The style of burqa worn by some women even hides the eyes. Muslims who oppose full concealment say that if Allah wanted women to hide their entire bodies, there would have been no need to tell Muslim men to lower their gaze. Which is a really interesting point, so I want to know how you feel about this. Next, we'll be looking at elderly women and modesty. So the rules are actually relaxed for elderly women. Surah 24, Ayah 60 says that such elderly women as are past the prospect of marriage, there is no blame on them if they lay aside their outer garments, provided they make not a wanton display of their beauty. But it is best for them to be modest, and Allah is one who sees and knows all things. Moving on to fact number 5, looking at modesty for the purpose of personal safety. Surah 33, Ayah 59 says, "O Prophet, tell thy wives and daughters and the believing women that they should cast their outer garments over their persons when abroad. That is most convenient, and that they should be known as such and not molested. And Allah is often forgiving, most merciful." So this verse is directed to all Muslim women, and it indicates that dressing modestly in outer coverings such as the abaya or burqa allows for women to be recognized as Muslims and to avoid being harassed. Historically and even today, it is believed that it is not very safe for women to go out without covering, as they could be mistaken for prostitutes or assaulted. Now let's talk about a screening curtain. So when the Quran first mentioned the concept of hijab, it was not actually as just a veil or a headscarf. Hijab was used in the context of a barrier or screen, as in this Quranic verse, Surah 33, Ayah 53. "And when ye ask the Prophet's wives for anything ye want, ask them from before a screen. That makes for greater purity for your hearts and for theirs. Taken in historical context, this verse seems to have been primarily intended to give the Prophet's wives some protection against nuisance visitors and people who were looking to gossip about them. Interestingly, gossip and slander were a great concern at the time that the verses relating to hijab were revealed. One set of verses, Surah 24, Ayah 1 and onwards, came immediately after the Prophet's wife Aisha was accused and acquitted of adultery. Moving on to our next fact, the Arabic word awra refers to the parts of the body which must be covered with clothing. Awra is any part of the body for both men and women which may not be visible to the public. It is interpreted differently depending upon the gender of the company that one is in. So for men, most Muslims accept that for men, everything between the navel and the knee is awra and therefore should be covered at all times. And for women, the rules are a little bit more complicated. There are a number of scenarios for women which are outlined. So in front of unrelated men, Muslim or non-Muslim, women must cover everything except the hands and the face. In front of close male relatives, awra is the navel to the knee and the stomach and the back. And in front of other Muslim females, awra is from the navel down to and including the knees. And moving on to talking about modesty between husbands and wives. So there are actually no restrictions on what a husband and a wife may show to each other in private. The Quran encourages married couples to enjoy each other's bodies. And looking at modesty for individuals in private, Islam highly values modesty. So even when alone, men and women are recommended never to be completely naked and to cover from the navel to the knee. Exceptions do apply, of course, where necessary, for example, taking a shower or going to the bathroom. And bringing us down to fact number 1, our last fact of today, we're looking at modesty and prayer. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said Allah does not accept the prayer of a woman who has reached puberty unless she wears a veil and has all parts of her covered that are considered to be awra. It is well accepted by most scholars that while praying, women must cover everything except the hands and face. It is forbidden to cover the face while praying unless a woman is in the presence of a man who is not of direct relation to her. Men must cover from the navel to the knee when praying.
Let's start off with the lie at number 10. We have Muslim women are forced to wear hijab. There is this big stereotype out there that Muslim women are all forced to wear a head covering, and this is a very popular misconception. Probably, yeah, like the most popular one. But Islam actually does not accept forcing someone into doing anything against their will. In the religion of Islam, women have the choice to wear the hijab, and it is no one's decision other than her own. Muslims revert to the verses of the Quran as well as the Hadith, and nowhere does it say in either of those sources that a man must make the decision for the woman to wear a hijab. The lie number 9 is hijab is only a head covering. There's a large number of Muslim women in certain countries who wear only a headscarf, but this actually doesn't fulfill the meaning of hijab. Hijab is an Arabic word meaning barrier or partition. It can also be translated into the word veil. And also in Arabic, the headscarf is called khimar, and the plural for it is kumur, and it has been used in the Quran specifically itself, and it states, "And do not display their beauty except what is apparent, and they should place their kumur over their bosoms." And that's taken from the Quran, Surah 24, verses 31. So the hijab is to cover the private parts of the body. Therefore, some scholars view that all parts of a person's body must be covered with a veil. And this is to be done so that people cannot recognize any private part on his or her body. So this type of covering is the hijab and not just the headscarf. Moving on to number 8, hijab is only for women. This is another big one, guys. The Quran says, and I quote, "Say to the believing men that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty, and say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their modesty." And that's found in Surah 24, verses 30 to 31 of the Quran. So you see, these verses show that guarding modesty is not only for women, but it's also for men. So men and women have the same role towards promoting modesty. However, the appearance and the methods can be different in terms of the nature and the situation of covering up. Number 7 brings us the lie that all hijab wearing women are more religious. Alright guys, so just to clear this one up, just because somebody wears a hijab does not mean that they're more religious. This is the same as saying that Christians who go to church every single weekend are more religious than those who go occasionally. Well, Muslim women who wear the hijab do so because they want to be modest and want to follow God's directions to a purer life, among other reasons. But Muslim women who wear the hijab, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're more religious than Muslim women who don't. It just means that that's where they are on their journey in Islam. The next lie to look at is women who wear the hijab are uneducated. This is a very unfortunate misconception and lie that exists. On many occasions, people assume that women in a hijab are less intelligent than others who don't wear one. But hijab has nothing to do with education or intelligence. Let's take a look at the Arab world, for example. Women oftentimes surpass men in their education as well as in STEM skills. And by the way, STEM stands for science, tech, engineering, and math. As well as they often surpass men in participating in social causes. So it's actually common for hijabi wearing women in the Arab world to excel in education over men. Halfway to number 5, hijabis can't be successful. Now, a woman wearing a hijab can do her job and succeed in her career just fine. There are many Muslim women who contribute to society and are very successful in their life while still wearing the hijab. One of the earliest examples is Aisha, the last wife of the Prophet Muhammad, and she's one example of women excelling. She didn't need to uncover herself to live a great life, and she actually contributed a lot to the writings of the Hadith and became a well-known scholar. So Muslims teach that the hijab is to really protect a woman, not to hinder them in any progress and development of their life. The lie number 4 is the hijab is never taken off. This is a common one in high schools and universities and colleges, but Muslim women are to wear the hijab when they go outside, they pray, as well as when they're with somebody of the opposite gender. But the men that she can uncover herself before are men that she can't marry, like her father, grandfather, nephew, brother, or uncle. But they should cover in front of men that they could potentially marry. So a Muslim woman does not always have to have their hijab on. They don't sleep with it, nor do they shower with it. Yeah, some people ask that, if a Muslim woman showers with it on. No. Next up, let's look at number 3. Women who wear hijab can't be feminists. Well, feminism is not defined by bikinis or body coverings. It's about female empowerment. In fact, women who cover their hair are promoting feminism even if they don't explicitly say that that's what they're doing. When a woman stands up for themselves, as well as they stand up for other women and wear the hijab and promote that as their choice, that is feminism. Lie number 2, practicing women wear hijab. According to research conducted by Seren Karasu, religiosity is linked to commonly Islamic associated practices such as wearing the hijab. But whether a woman's hair is covered is a bad rule of judgment for how religious she is. Some women wear the hijab but don't pray regularly or fast during the month of Ramadan, which are, as a matter of fact, obligatory in the religion of Islam. On the other hand, there are many Muslim women who don't cover their hair but pray regularly and fast during the month of Ramadan. According to the blog MuslimGirl.com, Shireen Izoli outlined her view that while the hijab is indeed a woman's obligation in Islam, it is not a pillar of Islam. And finally, let's end off with number 1, the hijab oppresses women. The idea that wearing a headscarf is oppressive in and of itself ignores the reasoning of the person who wears it. Third wave feminism holds that women should get to choose what practices are best for them. And it does not say that uncovered heads, it's more of a sign of liberation of women, and that's what it should look like. That's not what feminism says. And around the world, we see secular governments, and this also includes Muslim majority countries, they've tried to force women in certain ways to uncover their heads to attend school or to hold public office or even to just walk down the streets. There's many examples of this. As a matter of fact, even today, France infamously imposes legal restrictions on wearing the hijab. But with that said, voluntarily covering oneself can be an act of empowerment, not subjugation and oppression, and trying to force women to uncover, well,
that would be oppression.
Starting off at number 10, a sign of respect. Not all women choose to wear the hijab. Some women wear alternative versions known as head coverings, head scarves, or head wraps. In many instances, women don't cover their heads consistently for religious purposes, but instead as a sign of respect or obligation. For example, as a sign of respect, many women choose to or are asked to wear a head covering when entering certain places of worship. I personally have worn a head covering on multiple occasions when visiting a variety of places of worship in my travels to various countries. Even my late grandmother would wear a headscarf as a sign of respect whenever she went to church service. In other cases, when traveling to a country where it is the law for women to cover, a visiting woman would certainly cover as a sign of respect to the local culture, but also due to the obligation of the local laws. Up next, we have asserting an identity. Wearing the hijab or head covering is also a tool used by many women in asserting identity. French and British colonizers encouraged Muslim women to remove the veil and emulate European women. Consequently, in North African and Middle Eastern countries, the veil became a symbol of a national identity and opposition to the West during independence and nationalist movements. Today, some women wear the hijab to signal pride in their ethnic identity in history, and to send the message that they will not be changed to simply blend in with the masses. This is particularly important for hijabis living in countries where there has been an increase in prejudice, religious and cultural intolerance, and Islamophobia. Up at number 8, we have comfort. Some women just feel more comfortable wearing a hijab or head covering. For many, once they get used to applying the hijab every day or the head covering, it becomes like second nature and actually feels weird not to wear it. Being that the act of head covering is often associated with modesty and feelings of safety in a public setting, it also makes sense that wearing the hijab or head covering would add to a woman feeling more comfortable, especially around men she is not related to. And some people would be surprised, but wearing the hijab is actually connected to confidence. For many women, wearing the hijab or head covering gives a boost of confidence. Just like some women feel their best when they're wearing their favorite shade of lipstick, some women also feel a sense of confidence in wearing the perfectly paired hijab or headscarf with their outfit. Women take great care in how they wear and style their head coverings. Many women adding jewels or decorative pins, or even braiding or pleating techniques in the fabric of their head coverings. Indeed, a head covering or hijab can also be used as a fashion statement to complement an outfit, thus increasing pride and confidence in how a woman presents herself to others. It can also be used as an external declaration of faith. For some women, wearing the hijab or head covering gives them a sense of pride in wearing a visible declaration of their faith. Women can proudly wear their head coverings, knowing that they are representing their religion or their culture, as well as setting a good example for others who share their same faith or culture. It can also be used to indicate that one's faith is an integral part of their identity within a community or group of people with common beliefs, values, and spiritual practices. Up at number 5, the halfway point today, we have the matter of convenience. For some women, the hijab or head covering is also a tool of convenience. For many women, the stress of having to style their hair and makeup every day is not realistic or manageable depending on their day-to-day obligations. Imagine having to run to the store after a long day of cleaning, cooking, and caring for children. Rather than having to style one's hair just to look presentable in public, a woman can easily throw on her head covering and go about her business. For religious women, it can also be seen as a convenience because Muslim women, for example, must wear a hijab when praying. Since Muslims pray frequently throughout the day, it is much more simple for women during prayer time if they are already wearing their hijab in their daily life. Up next, we have the feeling of protection or being protected. The hijab or head covering is universally recognized as a symbol that the wearer is likely a woman of faith and modesty, meaning that men can expect that a woman who covers will also hold herself highly accountable to her faith and commandments. It is a very clear sign to men that the wearer is not interested in being chatted up, harassed, or approached with advances. A Of course, it is also understood that a woman's behavior must send the same message to back up the statement of wearing the hijab. And at number 3, we have the statement of feminism and female empowerment. In a world where a woman's beauty is often sold as a commodity used to sell everything from burgers to cars, choosing to cover oneself can surprisingly be seen as an act of rebellion. Many women choose to wear the hijab or head covering as an act of empowerment and taking back control of who they choose to share their beauty with. It also forces people to recognize them for their knowledge, skills, and abilities rather than their beauty, making a woman's character the quality of focus rather than their perceived sexual attractiveness. And of course, we have the reason of modesty. In many cases, women wear the hijab or cover their heads to shield the beauty of their hair, which in turn helps reduce the temptation and advances of others. A woman's hair can also be seen as her crown, something to be protected. By the way, wearing a hijab or hair covering is only one way of practicing modesty. Other efforts include wearing modest clothing that does not showcase the shape of the body, as well as covering the arms, legs, and chest area. Dressing modestly for many women is also a reminder in acting modestly to create a barrier between women and the opposite sex. For many women, choosing to cover their hair and bodies is a way of fighting against their own ego of the self in wanting to be appreciated or admired for their beauty. Instead of focusing on how they can be viewed as more attractive by others, women can value themselves for the beauty they contribute through who they are as a person and not how they look as a woman. And then up at number 1, the most important reason to be closer to God. For many religious women, wearing a hijab is not merely seen as a piece of cloth or head covering. It is also a command from God. So in the purest form, wearing the hijab or head covering is simply obeying God's command. Some women have described wearing the hijab as giving them a spiritual high that makes the wearer feel closer to God. Just like some may feel closer to God by wearing the symbol of the cross, the hijab also connects women with God as a physical reminder of upholding their religious values and commandments. Many women who cover talk about it as a way of demonstrating their submission to God and use it as a constant reminder to hold fast to religious beliefs such as being modest, honest, and generous to those in need.